Fix my disabled son, I'll marry you, mocked the Mafia boss. What the poor maid did next shocked everyone. In a mansion by the cliffs, a cold bet turns a child's pain into a punchline. But the poor maid doesn't flinch. She calms the boy, gets his foot to move, and forces the room to go silent. The boss laughs it off until he sees hope. Then the lights flicker, the house locks down, and the maid finds a secret. The boy's meds don't add up. Someone inside wants him weak. Red laser dots slide across the glass. Shots explode. The boss shields the maid and the child, and that cruel bet becomes a promise he can't take back. Now the maid is inside his world. Forced proximity, one bed in a safe room, hearts racing like sirens. A rival watches from the dark. A fiancé smiles too hard. And a single question burns through the walls. If the maid can fix what they broke, will the boss keep his vow? Or will loving her make them all the perfect target? The marble floor gleamed beneath Tessa's knees, pink-tinged water seeping into the cloth as she scrubbed. Each thunderclap made her shoulders tighten, but she kept working, determined to erase the evidence of whatever violence had played out here hours before. The massive windows rattled with the storm's fury, dark waves crashing against the cliffs far below. Upstairs, a different kind of storm raged. Theo's gasping breaths echoed down the hallway, each one stabbing at Tessa's heart. She abandoned the blood-stained cloth and ran, her practical shoes squeaking against the pristine floors. The boy's room was a fortress of wealth. Hand-painted murals, custom medical equipment tucked behind silk screens, and a bed that could swallow him whole. Theo thrashed against Egyptian cotton sheets, his small chest heaving. "Hey, buddy," Tessa said softly, approaching with measured steps. "Let's play our favorite game." His wide eyes found her face, panic making them glassy. Behind her, expensive heels clicked on hardwood. Bianca, wrapped in a designer dress that probably cost more than Tessa's yearly salary. Alexander's heavy presence filled the doorway next, his dark suit impeccable, despite the late hour. "Mirror my breathing," Tessa continued, ignoring them. She sat on the edge of Theo's bed, exaggerating her breaths. "Count with me. 1, 2. Theo's trembling fingers reached for hers. "The 3, he whispered. "Good job. Now can you feel your toes? Wiggle them for me." The boy's face scrunched in concentration. Slowly, painfully, his right foot moved. Just a twitch, but more than he'd managed in weeks. A sharp intake of breath from Alexander drew Tessa's attention. Hope flickered across his face before ice claimed his features again. The party guests crowded the doorway, their champagne glasses catching the light. "Well," Alexander drawled, cruel amusement dripping from his words. "Perhaps we have a miracle worker? Shall we make a wager, Miss Hale? Fix my son and I'll make you my bride instead?" Laughter rippled through the crowd. Bianca's perfectly painted lips curved into a smirk. Tessa met Alexander's gaze steadily. "Then don't laugh." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the thunder seemed to hold its breath. Alexander's eyes narrowed, something dangerous and curious awakening in their depths. "Jarek," he called, not looking away from Tessa. "Move Miss Hale's things to the family wing. She'll need to be closer to Theo." The enforcer materialized from the shadows, his face impassive. Tessa gathered her meager belongings, a worn duffel bag, a few medical texts, her mother's old quilt, and followed him down the opulent hallway. Bianca stood in her doorway, diamond earrings catching the light as she tracked their progress with calculating eyes. "Sweet dreams," she called, voice dripping honey-coated venom. The cot looked absurdly plain against the hand-carved panels outside Theo's suite. Tessa set her bag down as house lights dimmed, leaving only security strips glowing along the baseboards. Below, waves continued their relentless assault on the cliffs. Jarek positioned himself by her door like a statue, his shoulder holster visible beneath his jacket. "The boy doesn't usually sleep through the night," he said gruffly. "Be ready." Tessa smoothed her mother's quilt over the narrow cot. "I'm always ready." She could feel the weight of security cameras tracking her movements, the invisible web of protection and surveillance that wrapped around the Volkov estate. In the next room, Theo's breathing had evened out, but experience told her it wouldn't last. The storm thundered on, and Tessa sat on her cot, back straight against the wall. She pulled out her worn notebook, documenting Theo's progress with precise, tiny handwriting. Every twitch, every breath, every small victory would be recorded. She'd learned early that detailed records were armor against accusations and doubt. The notebook's margins filled with other observations, security rotations, medication schedules, the way Alexander's hands had trembled slightly before he'd masked it with cruelty. Knowledge was survival in a house like this. A soft whimper drifted through Theo's door. Tessa tensed, pen poised, waiting to see if it would escalate. Jarek shifted slightly, his shoes silent on the thick carpet. The wind howled outside, carrying salt and secrets. Somewhere in the vast estate, crystal glasses clinked as the party continued. Tessa could picture Bianca holding court, her smile sharp as she spun the night's events into ammunition. Alexander would be in his study by now, she guessed, drinking expensive scotch and pretending he hadn't seen hope in his son's eyes. Tessa flexed her own feet, remembering the triumph in Theo's small movement. Progress would come in microscopic steps, built on trust and consistency. She'd learned that in the pediatric ward, watching children rebuild themselves breath by breath, movement by movement. Another whimper, louder this time. Tessa set her notebook aside and stood, smoothing her practical skirt. Jarek's eyes tracked her movement as she approached Theo's door. "He won't want strangers tonight," he warned. "I'm not a stranger," Tessa replied. "I'm his mirror." She slipped into Theo's room, leaving the door open so Jarek could monitor them. The boy's breathing had grown ragged again, his sheets twisted around small legs that refused to cooperate. "I'm here," she whispered, settling into the chair beside his bed. "Count with me, buddy. The storm can't hurt you. We're stronger than the thunder." The antiseptic smell hit Tessa first as she settled beside Theo's bed. It clung to his dinosaur pajamas, too sharp and medical for a child's bedroom. Her gaze caught on the medication log propped on his nightstand, dates and times scattered in different handwriting. The dosing pattern made her stomach clench. Irregular intervals, amounts that didn't match the prescription labels. "Let's try something fun," she said softly, keeping her voice steady despite the concern churning inside. "Like a game." Theo's eyes, heavy with sedatives, found hers in the dim light. Thunder rolled outside, but he stayed focused on her hands as she demonstrated the sequence. Tap. Tap. She touched his knee. Count to 3, then try to lift just a tiny bit. If you can, you get to pick tomorrow's breakfast. His forehead wrinkled in concentration. 1 tap, 2 taps, 3 counts. And his knee trembled, lifting a precious inch off the mattress. A sharp intake of breath came from the doorway. Alexander stood there, his massive frame filling the space. For a heartbeat, raw wonder crossed his face as he watched his son move. Then the mask slammed back into place, but not before Tessa caught the flicker of desperate hope in his eyes. "Impressive," he said, voice clipped with forced control. "Continue." "The sedatives are necessary," Bianca cut in, appearing at his shoulder in a whisper of silk. Dr. Calder prescribed them himself. The boy needs rest to heal. "Did he prescribe this irregular dosing schedule?" Tessa asked, keeping her tone professional as she held up the log. The inconsistency could be affecting his progress. Alexander's eyes narrowed. "Jarek, get Calder here, now!" The enforcer melted away from his post, leaving them in tense silence, broken only by Theo's careful breathing. Tessa continued the gentle tapping routine, praising each tiny movement while her mind raced through medical protocols and warning signs. Dr. Calder arrived within 15 minutes, his bow tie slightly askew and his manner too smooth for the late hour. "Miss Verdi informed me of the proper dosing schedule herself," he said, barely glancing at Tessa. "The boy's condition requires aggressive management." "With respect, doctor," Tessa replied, standing to face him properly. "These sedative levels are blunting his motor responses. I've seen similar cases where a supervised taper actually improved recovery rates. The current dosing pattern is erratic enough to interfere with consistent progress." She laid out the potential side effects with careful precision, watching Alexander's expression grow darker with each point. When she finished, silence stretched like a wire about to snap. "A taper," Alexander said finally, the words falling like stones. "Supervised, Jarek will witness every dose." His gaze cut to Bianca, who had gone very still. "No exceptions?" "Darling," Bianca started, reaching for his arm. "The doctor knows best." "Enough." The single word carried enough weight to freeze the room. "Miss Hale has demonstrated results. We will try her method." Dr. Calder's professional smile tightened. "Of course, Mr. Volkov. I'll draw up a new schedule immediately." Theo had dozed off during the discussion, his small hand curled trustingly around Tessa's fingers. She noticed Alexander watching this point of contact, something unreadable crossing his face. A series of sharp chirps cut through the tension, security alerts lighting up phones throughout the house. Yarrick appeared in the doorway, murmuring something about an unmarked vehicle near the cliff access road. Alexander moved with fluid efficiency, checking the pistol at his hip before sliding it back into its holster. "Keep working," he ordered Tessa, already moving toward the door. "Jarek stays. No one in or out without my direct approval." He vanished into the storm-dark hallway, leaving Tessa to settle onto her cot, positioned just outside Theo's door. She maintained her gentle grip on his fingers through the gap, watching his chest rise and fall in finally peaceful sleep. Rain lashed the windows, and somewhere in the vast house, expensive heels clicked on marble as Bianca retreated to her wing. Dr. Calder's cologne lingered unpleasantly in the air, mixing with the antiseptic smell that still clung to Theo's pajamas. Tessa pulled out her notebook with her free hand, documenting the night's developments in precise detail. The medication log went into a separate section, each inconsistency highlighted for future reference. She'd learned in her previous positions that paper trails could be both shield and sword. Jarek took up his post with silent efficiency, his presence both reassuring and a reminder of the dangers that lurked beyond these walls. The security system continued its quiet monitoring, green lights blinking steadily in the darkness. Through it all, Theo's small fingers remained wrapped around hers, his trust a weight heavier than any storm. She thought of the way Alexander's control had cracked at the sight of his son's progress, revealing the desperate father beneath the ruthless exterior. The rain drummed against the windows, but Theo slept on, his breathing finally even and untroubled. Tessa settled into her vigil, one hand anchoring him to safety while the other recorded every victory, every concern, every detail that might help unlock his recovery. Outside, the storm raged on, and somewhere in that darkness, Alexander hunted whatever threats circled his domain. But here, in this quiet corridor, Tessa focused on the steady rhythm of Theo's breathing and the miracle of his small hand in hers, keeping watch as the night deepened around them. The pre-dawn hours cast long shadows through the estate's windows as Dr. Calder arrived, his bow tie perfectly centered despite the ungodly hour. His polished loafers clicked against marble as he strode down the hallway, medical bag swinging with practiced authority. "This is highly irregular," he announced, glancing dismissively at Tessa. "The current medication protocol is absolutely standard for cases like Theodore's." Tessa stood her ground, Theo's chart held firmly in her hands. "With respect, doctor, I've documented concerning side effects. The tremors in his hands persist well past the expected window, and his daytime alertness is significantly impaired." "Some grogginess is to be expected," Dr. Calder replied, his tone cooling. "The priority is managing his condition." "May I?" Tessa stepped forward, opening her carefully annotated notes. "I've tracked his response patterns over the last 12 hours. The tremors intensify approximately 40 minutes after each dose, and his cognitive engagement drops by roughly 60% during peak medication periods." Alexander watched from the doorway, his silence taking on the weight of gathering storm clouds. Bianca touched his arm, her diamond bracelet catching the dim light. "Darling, Dr. Calder has managed Theo's care for months. Surely we should defer to his expertise." Her perfect smile wavered when Alexander didn't respond. "I propose a 48-hour supervised taper," Tessa continued, meeting Dr. Calder's increasingly hostile stare. "Combined with consistent neurological stimulation, we could better assess his baseline function without compromising his comfort." Jarek materialized from the shadows, notepad in hand, recording every word with military precision. Dr. Calder's eyes flicked to the enforcer, then back to Tessa. "And you take responsibility if his condition deteriorates?" The doctor's voice dripped with professional disdain. "I'll stay outside his door throughout the night," Tessa replied firmly. "No medication changes without direct supervision. We document every response, positive or negative." Alexander's jaw tightened. "The taper begins now." "But—" Bianca's composure cracked, her fingers clenching on Alexander's sleeve. "Now," he repeated, brooking no argument. A staff nurse hurried forward, holding up a glass vial. "Doctor, should I prepare the emergency dose in case of increased agitation?" Tessa's hand shot out before the nurse could uncap the medication. "May I see that?" She examined the label carefully, comparing it to her records. "This lot number doesn't match our inventory log." The nurse paled. I'm sure it's just a clerical error." Jarek moved with surprising speed, for his size, plucking the vial from Tessa's hands and securing it in an evidence bag. The nurse backed away, nearly stumbling in her haste to retreat. Dr. Calder's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something ugly beneath. Mr. Volkov, I must protest this unprecedented interference with established medical protocols. Noted. Alexander's voice could have frozen flame. Jarek, call Dr. Elena Petrov at Metro Children's. I want a complete pediatric neurological assessment by noon. Sir. Jarek paused in his note-taking. She's independent, highly qualified, and owes me no favors. Alexander's gaze swept the assembled group. We'll have her unbiased opinion on all aspects of Theo's care, Dr. Calder sputtered. This is completely unnecessary. The elevator to the private pharmacy will be locked, Alexander continued, as if the doctor hadn't spoken. All current medications will be inventoried and secured. Any new prescriptions will require dual authentication. Bianca's perfect facade crumbled entirely. Alexander, you're overreacting. We only want what's best for Theo. Then you'll welcome Dr. Petrov's assessment. He turned to Tessa. You'll brief her on your observations when she arrives. Tessa nodded, exhaustion burning behind her eyes as she leaned against the wall. Through the windows, the night sky was beginning to lighten, dark as coal, shifting slowly to pewter. She could feel the weight of multiple gazes on her. Jarek's assessment, Dr. Calder's barely concealed hostility, Bianca's brittle anger. But it was Alexander's look that held the most intensity, something unspoken passing between them as he inclined his head slightly before turning away. In that moment, she understood that while he might not trust easily, he recognized truth when he saw it. The hallway gradually emptied. Dr. Calder escorted out by security, Bianca retreating to her suite with clicking heels and rigid shoulders, the nurse all but running back to the medical wing. Jarek remained at his post, the controversial vial secured and his notes complete. Through it all, Theo slept peacefully for the first time since Tessa's arrival, his breathing deep and even. She checked his monitors one more time, adjusting his blanket through the doorway before settling back on her cot. The rising sun painted the corridor in gradually warming light, transforming the luxurious space from shadowed mystery to crisp reality. Somewhere in the massive house, phones were already ringing as Alexander's orders rippled through his organization. The independent assessment would bring its own challenges, but for now, Tessa focused on the small victory of the moment, Theo's undisturbed rest, and the chance to help him heal properly. She pulled out her notebook, documenting the night's events while they were fresh in her mind. Every detail mattered. The unexpected vial, the doctor's reactions, the subtle power shifts that had played out in the pre-dawn hours. The pages filled with her careful observations, a record that could protect both Theo and herself if needed. Jarek handed her a fresh cup of coffee, the gesture acknowledging their shared vigil. She accepted with a grateful nod, the warmth seeping into her tired hands as the sky outside continued its gradual transformation from darkness to day. The eastern light spilled through the kitchenette windows, painting golden stripes across the marble countertops. Steam rose from a silver coffee service while Tessa stood behind Theo, her hands hovering near but not touching his shoulders. Just like we practiced, she said softly. Count of 3, then shift. Theo gripped the parallel countertops, his small fingers white-knuckled against the polished stone. The morning gulls wheeled past the windows, their cries mixing with the crash of waves below. His pajama-clad legs trembled slightly, but his face showed determination rather than fear. 1. Tessa kept her voice steady, encouraging. 2. She watched his feet adjust minutely. 3. Theo pushed himself up, straightening his legs. For 3 crystalline seconds, he stood completely upright, bearing his own weight. Color rushed into his pale cheeks, not the hectic flush of anxiety, but pure astonishment at his own achievement. I did it, he whispered, wonder breaking through his usual reserve. I really did it! The door opened behind them, and Alexander Volkov stepped in from the storm-swept grounds. His black wool coat was damp with sea spray, his usually immaculate hair tousled by the wind. There was a rust-colored smear drying on his white shirt cuff, blood that wasn't his own. But all of that faded when he saw his son standing. For one unguarded moment, the fearsome Volkov mask cracked wide open. Raw emotion flooded his face, hope, pride, and something that looked dangerously close to joy. He wasn't the untouchable crime lord or the ruthless businessman. He was simply a father, watching his child triumph. Then awareness returned, and the walls slammed back into place. But Tessa had seen it, that flash of pure humanity beneath the legend. Alexander pulled out his phone, turning slightly away. The specialist! Get her here now! Whatever it takes! His voice was clipped, but urgency rather than anger drove the tone. Use the service entrance. No cameras, no records. While he spoke, Tessa helped Theo back to his chair, praising his effort. She reached for his spare pajamas, planning to change him out of his sweat-dampened clothes, but stopped short. There was a sharp medicinal smell clinging to the fabric, familiar but wrong. "Sir," she said quietly, but with enough weight that Alexander ended his call immediately. These were in his backup wardrobe, but they smell like chemicals. Alexander crossed the room in 3 long strides, nostrils flaring as he caught the scent. Without a word, he began methodically searching the room, while Tessa did the same. She found what they were looking for in the painted toy chest beneath the window, a false bottom cleverly concealed beneath wooden blocks and picture books. Inside lay blister packs of pills, loose tablets in unmarked bottles, and several syringes still in their sterile packaging. Each item bore small labels in Bianca's elegant handwriting: dates, times, dosages. Tessa's stomach clenched as she recognized medications that should never be combined, especially not in pediatric cases. "Document everything," Alexander ordered, his voice deadly quiet. "Every label, every pill, every detail." Tessa was already pulling out her phone, methodically photographing each piece of evidence. Her hand stayed steady, even as her mind raced through the implications. The timestamps on Bianca's labels matched periods of Theo's worst regressions, times when his progress suddenly reversed for no apparent medical reason. Jarek appeared in the doorway, summoned by some silent signal. He produced evidence bags, helping Tessa catalog each item while keeping one eye on the security feeds in his tablet. The morning light strengthened, throwing the scene into sharp relief, the scattered pill packets gleaming dully, Theo watching wide-eyed from his chair, Alexander's face set in lines of granite as he processed this betrayal. The gulls continued their mournful cries outside, oblivious to the human drama unfolding behind the windows. "How long?" Alexander asked, the question barely above a whisper. "Based on these dates." Tessa checked the earliest label. "At least 8 months. The combination suggests someone with pharmaceutical knowledge, but no understanding of pediatric interactions. Or worse, complete understanding and deliberate misuse." Alexander's hands clenched, then deliberately relaxed. "Continue the documentation. Every detail matters now." Tessa worked efficiently, marking timestamps and locations in her log while Jarek bagged the physical evidence. The morning sun climbed higher, throwing rainbow refractions through the crystal water glasses on the counter. Such beauty in the midst of such ugliness. The doorbell chimed once, a specific signal that meant authorized entry through secure channels. "Your ghost doctor's here," Jarek murmured, checking his tablet to confirm the arrival protocols had been followed precisely. Tessa glanced up, beyond Jarek's shoulder, to the curved landing above the kitchenette. Bianca stood there in a perfectly tailored cream suit, her makeup flawless despite the early hour. Her smile was dazzling, sharp enough to draw blood. The air grew thick with unspoken accusations as their eyes met. Bianca's smile never wavered, but something cold and calculating moved behind her eyes. She had to know they'd found her cache, had to see the evidence bags and photography setup. Yet she maintained her polished facade, as if this were any other morning in the Volkov household. The neurologist moved with precise efficiency, her face obscured by a surgical cap and mask that revealed only alert brown eyes. Her hands were gentle but confident as she examined Theo, who sat quietly on his bed while morning light filtered through the heavy curtains. "When did the tremors begin?" she asked, watching Theo's fingers flutter against his palm. 3 months ago, Tessa answered, not needing to consult her notes. They intensified after evening doses, especially on therapy days. Alexander stood at the bedside, his large hand engulfing Theo's small one. He tried to maintain his usual stoic expression, but Tessa noticed how his thumb traced circles on his son's wrist, a gesture of comfort he couldn't quite suppress. The specialist made another note. "And the falling episodes?" "Clustered around medication changes," Tessa replied. "Most severe between 7 and 9 p.m. The doctor's eyes narrowed as she reviewed Theo's charts. "These microfractures," she pointed to several X-ray images. "The pattern and healing stages don't align with a single traumatic event. See these stress points? They suggest multiple incidents over time." Alexander's face hardened, though his gentle hold on Theo never changed. "Explain." "These breaks here and here," she indicated several spots, "show different healing phases, and this pattern is more consistent with repeated stress than one accident." The specialist turned to another page of test results, her frown visible even behind her mask. "I'm also concerned about the current medication protocol." These sedative levels are exceptionally high for a child his age and condition. I recommend an immediate hold on Dr. Calder's prescriptions pending full blood work and neurological mapping. Done, Alexander said without hesitation. Whatever tests you need, whatever specialists you want to consult, price is no object. The doctor nodded, continuing her examination while making detailed notes. Theo remained calm under her touch, his trust in Tessa's presence evident as she stayed within his line of sight. Later, in the laundry office, Tessa pored over staff logs and clothing records. The room hummed with industrial machines, steam rising from pressed linens as she traced patterns in the ledger entries. Here, she murmured, highlighting another suspicious entry. Theo's sleep clothes were swapped out before every major therapy session, always logged by the same person, Magda. She flipped through more pages, finding Bianca's maid's signature rubber-stamped on multiple concerning entries. The timing aligned perfectly with Theo's worst days, when his progress mysteriously reversed. Jarek stood in the doorway, his bulk blocking any view from the hallway. "Watch your step," he warned quietly. "You're pulling threads that could unravel dangerous things." Tessa looked up from the ledgers, her voice steady and clear. "I don't care about danger to myself. I won't let anyone harm that boy. Not anymore." A shadow shifted in the corridor, and Tessa realized Alexander had overheard her declaration. He said nothing, but his presence lingered for a moment before moving away. Footsteps barely audible on the thick carpet. The specialist requested another meeting in the main study, her professional demeanor unchanged, despite the growing tension in the house. "I need to review your security footage," she said, "particularly the cameras covering the main staircase. The pattern of incidents suggests specific timing we should verify." Alexander's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Jarek," he commanded, "open the vault. All footage, unedited." As if on cue, Bianca's heels clicked down the hallway, each sharp tap betraying her irritation. The sound echoed off the wood-paneled walls like tiny gunshots, a percussive reminder of unfinished business. The laundry ledger sat open on Tessa's lap, its damning evidence highlighted in yellow. Through the study's windows, clouds gathered over the ocean, promising another storm. But inside, the air crackled with a different kind of electricity, the kind that preceded life-changing revelations. Theo dozed in his wheelchair, exhausted from the morning's examinations but peaceful. His hand still occasionally reached for Tessa's, seeking the comfort that had become routine. She gave it freely, even as she prepared herself for whatever the security footage might reveal. The specialist arranged her notes methodically, each page a piece of a puzzle that was beginning to show a disturbing picture. Her eyes met Alexander's briefly over her mask, conveying the gravity of what they might find in those recordings. Jarek moved with silent efficiency toward the vault, his shoulders set with the tension of a man who had seen too many ugly truths come to light. The security panel beeped softly as he entered the complex code, each number another step toward unavoidable confrontation. Bianca's footsteps grew closer, then paused, as if she sensed the weight of the moment. The tap-tap-tap of her heels became more deliberate, almost defiant in their rhythm. She was marking her territory, announcing her presence in a house that had begun to slip from her grasp. The morning light caught the dust motes dancing in the air, making them shimmer like tiny stars falling through the beam. It was beautiful in its way. This calm before the storm, this moment of suspension before truth broke through the carefully maintained facade of the Volkov household. The wall of security monitors cast a blue glow across the study as the footage played. Alexander stood with his hands clasped behind his back, shoulders rigid as he watched scenes from the past months unfold in clinical detail. The specialist leaned forward, her pen scratching against her notepad. "There," she said, pointing to a timestamp from 3 weeks ago. "Watch his gait pattern." On screen, Theo moved through the hallway, his steps unusually unsteady. The next clip showed him near the main staircase, wavering slightly before his knee buckled. The fall looked almost gentle, cushioned by the thick carpet, but the implications were anything but soft. And here, the specialist continued. 4 days later, the same pattern of impairment. This isn't consistent with natural recovery from trauma. These are distinct episodes of sedation followed by motor difficulty. Tessa's throat tightened as she watched. Each clip showed Theo in his pajamas, the same ones she'd found chemical residue on. The timing aligned perfectly with her ledger findings, every incident following a night when Magda had logged a clothing change. The concentration of incidents near stairs and corners suggests... The specialist's voice dropped lower, professional detachment wavering. This appears to be a pattern of deliberately induced vulnerability. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Alexander's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went arctic. "Jarek," he said quietly, "initiate Protocol 7. Dr. Calder is to be escorted to the Blue Suite. No communications, no visitors." "Sir." Jarek moved immediately, speaking rapid instructions into his radio. Bianca swept into the room, her designer dress rustling. "This is absurd," she declared, voice pitched for maximum dramatic effect. "You're letting paranoia and this nursemaid's wild theories throw everything into chaos." "Paranoia kept me alive," Alexander replied without looking at her. "And chaos is what I do to people who target my son." The specialist gathered her notes with precise movements. "I'll have my full report within the hour. The blood work results should be back by then as well." Security teams moved through the house with practiced efficiency, checking windows, testing locks. The usual staff was dismissed early, leaving only core personnel. Jarek personally escorted Dr. Calder to his new accommodations, the doctor's protests about standard protocols falling on deaf ears. Tessa returned to her post outside Theo's room, her mind racing through everything they'd seen. The footage painted a clear picture. Someone had been systematically ensuring Theo appeared more impaired than he was, timing his worst moments for maximum visibility. She was checking Theo's evening routine checklist when she noticed the paper, its edge just visible under her door. Her heart stuttered as she picked it up, reading the message scratched in block letters. "Leave tonight if you value the boy." Without hesitation, she walked straight to Jarek's station. He examined the note carefully, using a small kit to dust for prints before sealing it in an evidence bag. "Good girl," he said gruffly, bringing it straight here. "I'm not leaving," Tessa said firmly. "Whoever wrote this needs to know that." "No one's asking you to." Alexander's voice came from behind her. He'd appeared silently, as he often did. "The house is secure. We're initiating full lockdown protocols for the night." Throughout the estate, subtle changes rippled outward. Security. Lights shifted from white to amber, creating a warm but watchful glow. The faint whir of steel shutters being tested echoed through the corridors, once, twice, ensuring smooth operation. Tessa returned to her cot, positioned where she could see both Theo's door and the hallway approaches. She kept her shoes on, ready to move at a moment's notice. Through Theo's partially open door, she could hear his steady breathing, peaceful in sleep. The house settled into its fortress mode, cameras tracking every shadow, sensors alive to any anomaly. Guards patrolled in coordinated patterns, their footsteps barely audible on the thick carpets. Jarek maintained his position at the security hub, monitoring feeds from every angle of the estate. In the Blue Suite, Dr. Calder paced like a caged animal, watched by impassive guards. Bianca had retreated to her rooms, her protest about overreaction met with stony silence from Alexander. The specialist worked in the study, correlating medical records with security footage, building a case that grew more damning by the hour. Alexander moved through the house like a gathering storm, checking positions, reviewing protocols. His quiet fury had crystallized into something sharp and focused, a blade being honed for precise use. When he passed Theo's room, his step always slowed, listening for his son's breathing. The ocean crashed against the cliffs below, its rhythm a constant backdrop to the night's tension. Tessa adjusted her position on the cot, keeping her body between Theo's door and the hallway. Her training manual lay open beside her, but her attention remained on every sound, every shadow. Camera feeds showed the grounds empty, except for security patrols, their infrared signatures moving in careful patterns. The gate sensors remained undisturbed, the perimeter unbreached. But something in the air spoke of waiting, of pieces moving into position for whatever would come next. Jarek's radio crackled softly with status reports, all clear, all positions secure. He acknowledged each one with minimal words, his attention split between the monitors and his own instincts, honed by years of protecting the family. The specialist's light still burned in the study as she assembled her evidence, building a case that would need to be airtight. Her occasional requests for specific footage or records were handled quickly, efficiently, as the house's systems bent to the task of uncovering truth. Tessa checked her watch. Barely past dusk, though it felt like midnight. The amber lights cast soft shadows, creating pools of warmth in the otherwise austere hallway. She could hear Theo turn over in his sleep, the sound immediately drawing her attention until she confirmed it was just normal movement. The night stretched ahead, full of possibility and threat, but the house was ready, its defenses alert, its people prepared. Whatever had been happening in the shadows would soon face the light, and Tessa intended to be there when It did, protecting the boy who had become her mission and her heart. The first sign was subtle, lights dimming for a heartbeat before brightening again. Tessa looked up from her cot, counting seconds until the backup generator would kick in. 1, 2. The estate's power grid hiccuped, electronic locks clicking as they reset. A whimper from Theo's room had her moving before conscious thought. The boy was tangled in his sheets, eyes wide with confusion as the familiar hum of his nightlight faltered. Tessa scooped him up, blanket and all. "Let's watch the stars while the power settles," she whispered, carrying him toward the sunroom. The glass-enclosed space usually offered a panoramic view of the coastline, but tonight it felt exposed. Theo's fingers curled into her shirt as she settled them both into a cushioned corner. "Count the constellations with me," she asked, keeping her voice steady. But before Theo could answer, something caught her eye. Tiny red dots dancing across the glass like deadly fireflies. Her blood turned to ice. Laser sights. Alexander burst through the door, his expression murderous. He moved with lethal grace, crossing the space in 3 long strides. "Down!" he commanded, one hand already reaching for them. Without hesitation, he shoved them toward what appeared to be a solid wall panel. His fingers found an invisible catch, and suddenly they were stumbling into a narrow opening as it swung inward. The hidden door had barely clicked shut behind them when glass shattered in the room they'd just vacated. The passage was pitch black until Alexander activated something on his phone, casting a dim glow. Steep stairs descended into darkness, the walls close enough to touch on both sides. Theo trembled against Tessa's chest as they hurried down, their footsteps echoing in the confined space. The air was thick with different scents. Alexander's gun oil and cologne, Tessa's lavender shampoo, the musty stillness of the secret stairwell. Theo's breathing started to speed up, threatening panic, but Tessa immediately began her grounding routine. 10 fingers, 10 toes, she whispered against his hair. "Count them with me, Lubov." The Russian endearment slipped out unconsciously, picked up from hours of listening to Alexander speak to his son. Above them, muffled thuds and shouts filtered through the walls. Jarek's team was engaging the attackers. Alexander's phone buzzed silently, and he checked messages without breaking stride, leading them deeper into the estate's hidden infrastructure. They emerged into what looked like a command center, screens displaying security feeds from every angle of the property. One camera showed the sunroom, where a black-clad figure lay face down, Jarek's knee in his back as other security team members secured the area. "Seal the perimeter," Alexander ordered into his phone. "Full sweep, no one leaves." His voice was arctic, promising retribution, but his hand was gentle as he helped Tessa settle Theo onto a leather couch. The boy's leg twitched, his foot flexing voluntarily as he adjusted his position. Despite the chaos, Alexander's eyes caught the movement, and something soft flickered across his face before the mask of control returned. Through the monitors, they watched the efficient machine of Volkov security process the scene. The captured shooter was dragged to a holding area, where Jarek's questioning methods proved persuasive. It didn't take long for names to spill out. "Ilya Reznikov!" the man gasped, blood trickling from his split lip. "He said we had help inside. A lady would make sure the kid was where we needed." Alexander's jaw clenched, tendons standing out in his neck. Tessa focused on Theo, wetting a cloth from a first aid kit to cool his forehead. The boy's eyes were heavy now that the immediate danger had passed, adrenaline giving way to exhaustion. The command center hummed with activity as reports flowed in. 3 more attackers neutralized on the grounds, security footage showing a suspicious vehicle that had been lurking near the service entrance. Radio chatter as teams swept every corner of the estate. Tessa maintained her quiet counting games with Theo, turning it into a story about brave knights protecting their castle. Alexander moved between monitoring the situation and checking on his son, each time pausing to note Theo's increasing responsiveness. The boy's foot flexed again, stronger this time, as he shifted to get more comfortable. Alexander's hand found the small heel, feeling the intentional movement. For a moment, father and son locked eyes, sharing something wordless and profound. Outside, a final police siren wailed into silence as the generator settled into its steady rhythm. The estate's power grid stabilized, security systems running at full capacity. Screens showed armed guards at every entrance, dogs patrolling the grounds, and infrared sensors scanning for any remaining threats. In the safe room's controlled environment, Theo's breathing had evened out, his body relaxing against Tessa's side. She kept the cool cloth on his forehead, humming softly while Alexander coordinated with his security team. The boy's hand found his father's sleeve, holding on with surprising strength. Jarek's voice crackled over the comm system, reporting all areas clear and containment protocols in place. The initial crisis had passed, but its implications hung heavy in the air. Someone inside the house had helped target a child. Someone Theo trusted had betrayed that trust. The command center's multiple screens painted the estate in shades of blue and green. Thermal imaging showing the heat signatures of guards moving in precise patterns. The captured shooter was secure in a holding cell, awaiting more thorough questioning. Evidence teams photographed the shattered sunroom, marking bullet trajectories and collecting shell casings. Through it all, Theo remained their center of gravity. His occasional movements, each one stronger than the last, drew both adults' attention like moths to flame. Even in crisis, his progress was undeniable, a reminder of exactly what they were fighting to protect. Alexander's war room hummed with tactical precision as screens and papers covered every surface. Tessa sat beside him, her fingers flying over keyboards while Jarek arranged surveillance photos like tarot cards. The captured shooter's burner phone had yielded a trove of encrypted messages. Here, Tessa pointed to a series of transactions. These payments route through Gibraltar, then bounce through 3 shells before landing in an account linked to Verde Holdings. Alexander's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Verde, Bianca's family business. Boss, Jarek slid over another file. The shell company's paperwork matches formats we've seen from other Verde subsidiaries. Same lawyer, same registrar. Alexander lifted his phone, voice clipped as he issued commands. Freeze all Verde-associated accounts. Full audit, going back 5 years. I want every transaction, every signature, every coffee receipt. His fingers drummed once on the desk. Call Judge Morton. We need those warrants within the hour. The door burst open as Bianca swept in, designer dress wrinkled from her containment in the guest wing. This is absurd. You can't possibly think I had anything to do with— Sit down! Alexander's quiet tone cut through her protest like a blade. She sank into a chair, manicured hands gripping the armrests. Darling, be reasonable. My family has supported your interests for years. This witch hunt. Your family, Alexander interrupted, has been skimming from my legitimate enterprises while feeding information to Reznikov. He turned his laptop, showing her the payment trails. Did you think I wouldn't find it? Those could be forged. That little nursemaid probably— Enough. The word barely carried sound, but Bianca flinched. You used my son, sedated him, made him vulnerable to create an opening for Reznikov's men. I would never hurt Theo. I love— Do not, Alexander's voice went deadly soft. Say his name again. Tessa watched the exchange, noting how Bianca's practiced poise cracked under Alexander's focused rage. The woman's eyes darted between them, calculating angles of escape. You have no proof that will stand in court, Bianca tried, lifting her chin. And my family won't stand for this harassment. Your family, Alexander leaned forward, won't exist as a financial entity by sunrise. Every account, every holding, every offshore trust. I will peel them apart, layer by layer, until nothing remains but truth. His smile was terrifying in its gentleness. And you will watch it burn. Bianca's face drained of color. You wouldn't dare! The political implications— Try me. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Then Alexander turned to Tessa, his expression shifting to something more complex. The bet stands, he said quietly. I don't lie to you. Heat bloomed between them as their eyes met. Tessa felt it like a physical touch, this dangerous man's raw honesty. Not until your son is safe, she answered, holding his gaze. A cry from the security feed interrupted them. Theo, thrashing in his bed upstairs. Tessa was moving before anyone could speak, taking the stairs 2 at a time. She found him tangled in sheets, face tight with remembered fear. Tessa, he called, voice small in the darkness. Right here, Lyubov. She perched on the bed's edge, smoothing his hair. Bad dream? He nodded, then did something remarkable. Both feet moved under the blanket, tiny, determined movements, but unmistakably voluntary. Tessa's heart soared. Look what you did, she whispered, squeezing his hand. So strong. Alexander appeared in the doorway, his imposing frame softened by the dim light. He crossed to the bed, lowered himself to sit on the opposite edge. For once, his guard was completely down as he watched his son breathe. Outside, the sky began to lighten, pearl gray bleeding into azure. Jarek's quiet voice carried through the hallway as he doubled the security rotation, positioning armed men at every approach. Theo's breathing deepened into sleep, one hand still clutching Tessa's fingers. She looked up to find Alexander watching her, his expression unguarded and intense. You're good with him, he said softly. "He's good," she replied. "Brave, determined, like his father." Something flickered in Alexander's eyes. Pain, perhaps, or hope. He reached across the sleeping boy to touch her wrist, just once, then withdrew. The room fell quiet except for Theo's steady breathing and the distant sound of waves against the cliffs. Dawn painted the walls in watercolor shades of pink and gold, turning the security cameras into subtle shadows. Jarek appeared briefly in the doorway, nodding to confirm the new guard rotation was in place. Through the window, Tessa could see armed men moving with military precision across the grounds, securing every angle of approach. But here in this room, watching father and son together in the growing light, she felt something deeper than security protocols and revenge. She saw possibility, healing, hope, stubborn as the tiny movements of Theo's feet under the blanket. Alexander sat motionless, drinking in the sight of his sleeping child. His usual mask of control had slipped entirely, revealing a father's raw love and fear. When Theo shifted in his sleep, another small foot movement visible under the covers, Alexander's breath caught audibly. Dawn continued its slow advance across the sky, painting the room in ever-changing colors. The estate stirred to life around them, guards changing shifts, kitchen staff beginning breakfast preparations, cleaning crews dealing with the aftermath of violence in the sunroom. But in this moment, time seemed suspended. Theo slept peacefully. Between them, his face smooth and young in the early light. Alexander remained on the bed's edge, his customary tension gradually easing as he watched his son's chest rise and fall. Through the open door, Tessa could hear Jarek coordinating with the security team, his low voice a reminder of the protection surrounding them. The new day was beginning, bringing with it all the complications of betrayal and danger and revenge. Yet here, in this quiet room, with dawn bleeding into the sky, there was only this: a father watching his son breathe, and the promise of healing held in the smallest movements of hope. Dawn painted the eastern sky in watercolor strokes when Dr. Calder burst through the door, his scrubs wrinkled as if he'd slept in them. His face was flushed, hair disheveled, clutching a manila folder like a shield. "Dangerous lab results," he announced, fumbling with a syringe. "The boy needs immediate sedation for his safety." Tessa stepped between him and Theo's bed, her stance protective but controlled. "Stop right there. We're not administering anything without proper documentation." "This is a medical emergency." Calder's hand trembled slightly as he advanced. "The lot number," Tessa said firmly. "Show me the vial." Alexander moved from his position by the window, his presence filling the room. "Do as she says." Calder's fingers tightened around the syringe. "This is ridiculous. I'm the doctor here." "And I'm the one who found mismatched lot numbers yesterday," Tessa cut in. "Chain of custody is broken. We're not risking Theo's life on mystery medications." Jarek appeared silently in the doorway, field testing kit already in hand. At Alexander's nod, he approached Calder. "Give me the syringe," Alexander ordered, his voice deadly quiet. "Now." Sweat beaded on Calder's forehead as he surrendered the needle. Jarek worked quickly, extracting a drop onto the test strip. The liquid spread, changing color, not the pale blue of a sedative, but an angry purple that screamed danger. "Paralytic," Jarek confirmed grimly. "Not anything prescribed." Alexander's expression hardened to granite. "Explain." Calder crumpled, shoulders sagging. "She said she'd ruin me. The donors, the board position, everything gone if I didn't cooperate." "Bianca." Alexander didn't phrase it as a question. "She has connections everywhere. Said it was just to keep the boy quiet, manageable. I didn't know about the paralytic, I swear." "Shut up!" Alexander's command cracked like a whip. He turned to Jarek. "Secure him!" As Jarek zip-tied Calder's wrists, Alexander pulled out his phone, dialing with precise movements. "Marcus, I need you to coordinate with law enforcement. We have attempted murder, conspiracy, evidence of long-term medical abuse. But keep them outside the gates for now. I want everything documented before we open up." Tessa moved to check on Theo, who thankfully had slept through the confrontation. His breathing was steady, face peaceful in the morning light. She adjusted his blanket, noting with pride how his feet twitched in sleep. Natural movement, unimpeded by drugs. A commotion in the hallway drew their attention. Security feeds flickered on the mounted screen, showing Magda slipping through a service entrance, her movements quick and furtive. "Sir!" Jarek's voice was urgent. "She's heading for the marina." They watched as Magda sprinted across the grounds, her uniform stark against the morning mist rolling in from the ocean. She clutched something to her chest. Files, maybe, or a laptop. "Bring the cars," Alexander ordered Jarek, already moving. "Full team, parallel pursuit. She'll lead us to wherever Bianca's hiding." Tessa grabbed her windbreaker from the hook, mind racing. "I'm coming with you." Alexander paused, studying her. "It could be dangerous." "Theo trusts me. He'll be scared if he wakes up without either of us." She reached into her go bag and pulled out a worn teddy bear, tucking it safely inside. "He'll want this when we get back." Understanding flickered across Alexander's face. The bear was more than comfort. It was a promise of return, of stability in chaos. He nodded once, sharply. Security teams mobilized with practiced efficiency. Jarek coordinated through his earpiece, directing units to cover every possible escape route. The estate hummed with controlled tension as armed men took positions and vehicles rolled into place. Calder sat slumped against the wall, guarded by two stone-faced security officers. His medical credentials hung crooked around his neck, a mockery of the oath he'd betrayed. The test strip on the table still showed that damning purple stain, evidence of how close they'd come to disaster. Morning sun streamed through bulletproof glass, catching the ocean mist and creating halos around the armed men moving into position. Somewhere in the distance, a boat engine roared to life. Tessa checked Theo one last time, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. He stirred slightly, feet moving under the blanket in that wonderful new way that meant healing, not sedation. She tucked the covers more securely around him. "The night nurse is vetted?" she asked Alexander. "Triple-checked background, monitored constantly, Maid," he confirmed. "And Vasily's team will guard the door. No one enters without direct authorization from me." Jarek returned, car keys in hand. 3 vehicles. Standard pursuit formation. Marina's locked down, but there's a dozen private boats that could have been compromised. Coast Guard's been notified to monitor all movement in the area. The estate's massive garage doors rolled open, revealing an array of armored vehicles. Engine sounds echoed off the stone walls as drivers took their positions. Armed men moved with practiced precision, loading gear and checking weapons. Alexander's hand brushed Tessa's lower back as they headed for the lead car, a gesture both protective and grounding. Despite the gravity of the situation, heat sparked at the contact. "Stay close to me," he murmured. "Always," she replied, and meant it. The morning air was crisp with salt and possibility as they slid into the waiting vehicle. Jarek took the wheel, navigation already plotting the fastest route to the marina. Behind them, 2 more cars filled with security teams waited for the signal to move out. Through the reinforced windows, Tessa could see the estate settling into lockdown mode. Steel shutters descended over windows. Automated barriers rose from manicured lawns. Armed patrols moved in practice patterns. The morning sun caught on gun barrels and tactical gear, turning everything to dangerous gold. But her mind was already racing ahead to their return, to Theo waking to find his bear waiting, to more tiny victories of healing, more moments of trust built between father and son, to the future they would protect, no matter the cost. The garage door opened onto the coastal road, salt air rushing in. Alexander checked his weapon one final time as Jarek eased the car forward. The pursuit was about to begin. Dawn's gray fingers clawed through dense coastal fog as their convoy reached the marina. Gulls wheeled overhead, their cries mixing with the low moan of foghorns from cargo ships further out. The wooden planks of the private pier creaked under their feet, slick with morning dew and salt spray. Jarek's team spread out in practice formation while Tessa stayed close to Alexander, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through breaks in the mist, they caught glimpses of a figure ahead, Bianca's designer coat stark against the pewter sky. "It's over, Bianca!" Alexander's voice carried across the dock, cold as the water below. "We have Calder's confession!" Bianca whirled to face them, her perfect composure finally cracking. Salt wind whipped her hair into a dark halo, makeup smeared beneath wild eyes. "You think you know everything?" She laughed, high and brittle. "You don't know anything." "Then enlighten me." Alexander advanced slowly, his movements predatory. Security teams blocked escape routes along the pier's length. "The crash?" Bianca's lips twisted. "That wasn't me. That was Reznikov's opening move, his warning shot." She backed toward the end of the pier where a sleek launch bobbed in the choppy water. "I just saw an opportunity afterward. The great Alexander Volkov, brought low by a broken child." Tessa's fingers curled into fists, rage burning in her chest at Bianca's casual cruelty. Alexander went terrifyingly still. "You helped poison my son!" Each word fell like ice. "I helped maintain the situation Reznikov created." Bianca's smile was razor sharp, He'll be so pleased to see me." Before anyone could move, she vaulted over the pier's edge, landing in the launch with practiced grace. The engine roared to life, sending white water churning as the boat shot forward into the fog bank. "Sir?" Jarek's hand went to his weapon. "Let her go!" Alexander's voice was distant. "She's heading straight to Reznikov's compound. We'll have confirmation of everything." They watched the boat's wake fade into gray nothingness, the sound of its engine swallowed by waves and foghorns. Gulls swooped and screamed overhead, as if mocking their failure to catch her. Back in the SUV, protected by bulletproof glass and privacy screens, Alexander's careful control finally cracked. His hands shook as he braced them against the leather seat, breath coming hard and fast. "All this time!" The words seemed torn from his throat. "Reznikov killed Anna, targeted my son, and I didn't see—" Tessa reached for him instinctively. His kiss was desperate, drowning, full of years of buried rage and fresh pain. She let herself answer it for one burning moment, tasting coffee and anguish on his lips before gently pulling back. "Protect your son first," she said softly, though her body hummed with wanting him. "Then we talk about us." Alexander pressed his forehead to hers, breathing ragged. "You're right." His voice was rough with need and restraint. Always right about what matters. His phone buzzed. An unlisted number. Alexander answered on speaker, his mask of control sliding back into place. "It's confirmed," a gravelly voice reported. "We found the original brake line from Anna's car. Matches Reznikov's signature method exactly. He wanted you broken, not dead. The boy was phase 2, keeping you vulnerable, off balance." Alexander's eyes went winter pale, all emotion freezing into something terrifying. "Thank you, Marcus. Send everything to the usual drop." The drive back to the estate passed in tense silence. Tessa watched Alexander's profile, seeing the weight of revelation settle onto his shoulders like armor. By the time they reached the house, his expression was carved from stone. Evening shadows stretched across the dining room as Alexander spread maps across the polished table. Surveillance photos and intelligence reports created a web of connections, all leading to Reznikov's territory. Yarek coordinated with team leaders, plotting entry points and escape routes. "You should take Theo and go somewhere safe," Alexander said without looking up. "I can arrange." "No." Tessa's voice was firm. "I won't abandon him. Or you." Now he did look at her, something raw and wondering in his eyes. "I can run communications," she continued. "I know the security protocols, the camera systems. I can coordinate from the command center while keeping Theo calm." Alexander studied her face, searching for any hint of fear or uncertainty. He found only steady determination. Jarek wordlessly slid a headset across the table, followed by a quick, approving nod. The simple gesture carried clear meaning. She'd earned her place in this fight. Tessa picked up the headset, feeling its weight. Through the dining room windows, she could see the last rays of sunlight painting the ocean crimson, the same color as the threat assessments marked on Alexander's. Maps, spreading like bloodstains across paper territories. Security teams moved with increased urgency through the house, checking weapons and testing equipment. The air hummed with controlled tension, every person focused on their role in the coming storm. Theo's soft voice drifted down from upstairs, reading aloud with his night nurse. Brave and unaware of the gathering war being planned below, Tessa caught Alexander's gaze shifting toward the sound, saw the fierce protectiveness that flared in his eyes. She picked up a marker and leaned over the maps. "Show me what you need me to watch for." Her voice was steady, certain. This was where she belonged, helping guard what mattered most. The dining room became their war room as night fell, lit by tactical displays and determination. They would face whatever came next together, protecting the fragile trust and healing they'd built in this house by the sea. The night pressed against the SUV's windows like black velvet, broken only by the harsh glow of the laptop screen. Tessa's fingers flew across the keyboard, cycling through dock security feeds while her voice stayed steady in the comm link. "Loading bay clear. 2 guards at the north entrance, changing shift in 3 minutes." She heard Alexander's measured breathing through her headset. The sound anchored her as she tracked his team's approach to Reznikov's warehouse. Theo's stuffed bear sat propped against the console, its button eyes reflecting the blue light of the screens. "Southeast camera shows a delivery truck leaving," she reported. "Gate opening. Now, you have your window." Through the feeds, she watched Alexander and Jarek slip between shadows, deadly efficient. Their team spread out, covering angles with practiced precision. The warehouse loomed ahead, a concrete monster squatting by the water. Internal cameras accessed, Tessa murmured, breaking through the warehouse's security. First floor shows 6 heat signatures, 2 in the office, 4 patrolling. She could hear Alexander's soft exhale, appreciation for clean intel. The team moved like smoke through the building's blind spots, taking down guards with silent efficiency. Tessa tracked their progress, heart hammering against her ribs. "Office ahead," she whispered. 2 voices, 1 female. The camera feed showed Bianca, her designer outfit incongruous against industrial steel, gesturing frantically at a thick-necked man Tessa assumed was Reznikov. Papers scattered across the desk between them. Alexander's voice came low through the comm. "Got eyes on the target!" The next moments exploded in controlled chaos. The office door burst inward. Bianca screamed. Reznikov reached for a weapon. Alexander moved like a cobra strike. "Files on the left," Tessa directed, spotting labeled folders. "Cabinet behind the desk." Jarek swept in, gathering drives and documents while Alexander held Reznikov at gunpoint. Bianca backed against the wall, mascara streaking her cheeks. "Please," she begged. "I just needed protection. Calder was supposed to handle everything quietly." The sound of boots in the corridor cut her off. Tessa's fingers flew across keys, checking cameras. "Multiple hostiles," she warned. "Coming up the east stairs." Gunfire erupted, bullets punching through walls. Tessa flinched but kept her eyes on the screens, searching for escape routes. "Loading dock clear," she reported, "but they're boxing you in from above." Alexander's curse came sharp through the comm. She watched him grab Bianca's arm, dragging her toward cover as Jarek clutched a metal case of drives. More shots rang out, sparking off steel supports. "Tessa!" Alexander's voice was tight. "Route out, now!" She scanned feeds frantically. "Service corridor on your left takes you to the water side." The team moved fast, returning fire. Tessa's breath caught as bullets struck too close to Alexander. His answering shots were precise, lethal. They burst from the building's side door into darkness. Tessa grabbed the bear and slid to the driver's seat, engine already running. Jarek appeared first, shoving Bianca into a second vehicle. Alexander emerged last, covering their retreat. A fresh burst of gunfire shattered the night. The SUV's window exploded inward, sending glass across Tessa's lap. She curled instinctively around Theo's bear, shielding it with her body. Alexander wrenched open the passenger door, freezing for a heartbeat at her protective gesture. Something fierce and tender flashed across his face before he dove inside. "Go!" he ordered, returning fire through the broken window. Tessa slammed the accelerator. The SUV leaped forward as flames erupted behind them, Yarek's team setting charges to cover their escape. The warehouse blazed against the dark sky, reflecting orange on the harbor water. Her mind raced through memorized security patterns. "Side gate," she called out, hands steady on the wheel. "They won't have it covered yet." She took the turn hard, tires screaming. Alexander braced himself, still shooting at pursuit vehicles. The gate appeared ahead, chain link gleaming. Tessa punched in the override code she'd stolen from the security files. The gate rolled back just enough for them to scrape through. Behind them, Jarek's car followed close, hemming in their prisoner. They roared into the night, leaving chaos and fire behind. Tessa navigated through back streets, putting distance between them and any followers. Her pulse gradually slowed as the sounds of pursuit faded. Alexander finally lowered his weapon. His hand found her knee, squeezing once. Gratitude, promise, and something deeper, all compressed into that silent touch. Tessa kept driving, the stuffed bear tucked safely between them, leading their small convoy home through the darkness. They had what they needed now: proof of Reznikov's original attack, evidence of Bianca's betrayal, documentation of Calder's role in drugging Theo. The pieces were in place to end this. Tessa glanced at the bear, its fur slightly singed from flying glass. She'd brought it for comfort, a small piece of Theo to hold onto during the raid. Now it sat like a talisman between them, a reminder of what they were fighting to protect. The city lights fell away behind them as they headed for the coastal road. Alexander kept his hand on her knee, his touch both possessive and grateful. Through the shattered window, salt air rushed in, clearing away the smell of gunpowder and fear. In the rearview mirror, Tessa could see Jarek's headlights following steadily. Bianca was secured in his car, finally caught in her own web of lies and desperation. The case of drives sat protected in their trunk, filled with the evidence they needed. Tessa drove on through the night, hyper-aware of every shadow and sound. The bear's button eyes caught occasional gleams of streetlight, almost seeming to wink with shared secrets. She felt Alexander's periodic glances, saw the way his expression softened when he noticed how she'd positioned herself to keep shielding the stuffed animal. Even now. The coastal road stretched ahead, a ribbon of black against darker sea. They were almost home, almost back to Theo. almost ready to end this fight that had started years ago with a sabotaged car and a grieving widower who'd locked his heart away until a stubborn therapist and a brave little boy helped him find it again. The industrial road stretched empty before them until it wasn't. Two black SUVs swung out from side streets, boxing them in with military precision. Metal gleamed against metal as their vehicles screeched to a halt. "Down!" Alexander commanded, shoving Tessa below the dashboard. Glass sparkled as bullets punched through their already damaged windshield. In one fluid motion, Alexander pulled a pistol from his shoulder holster. "Like this," he said, wrapping Tessa's hands around the grip. His chest pressed against her back, adjusting her stance. "Squeeze gently, let the recoil flow through your arms." Together, they aimed through the spider-webbed glass. The lead SUV's radiator made a perfect target, fluid already seeping from earlier damage. Their synchronized shots rang out. 1, 2, 3. Steam hissed from the punctured radiator, white clouds billowing in the pre-dawn air. Movement caught Tessa's eye. A figure emerged from the smoke, stance wide and confident. Even without Alexander's sharp intake of breath, she knew. Reznikov, the man who'd orchestrated everything, from the crash that killed Alexander's first wife to the systematic drugging of Theo. Reznikov's gun came up, aimed straight at Tessa. Time stretched like cold honey. "No!" Alexander lunged, spinning to place his body between her and the threat. The bullet meant for her head slammed into his shoulder instead. Blood bloomed across his jacket, but Alexander didn't falter. His return fire was devastating, methodical. Bullets tore into Reznikov's engine block, forcing him back as the vehicle began to smoke. More shots from Yarek's position gave them coverage as Reznikov's team scrambled for their backup car. In the distance, sirens began to wail. Reznikov's team peeled away, tires screaming on asphalt. "Pressure!" Alexander gritted out, slumping against the seat. "Upper right quadrant." Tessa's hands moved automatically, finding the wound. Blood pulsed hot between her fingers as she pressed down. She grabbed the emergency kit from under the seat, tearing open gauze with her teeth. "Breathe with me," she instructed, using the same calm voice she'd used countless times with Theo. "In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, focus on the count." Alexander's eyes locked onto hers, pain-glazed but determined. She felt his chest rise and fall beneath her hands as he matched her rhythm. "Good," she praised, securing the pressure dressing. "Again, in 2, 3, 4. Jarek appeared at the window, gun still ready. "Area's clear. Medical team standing by at the estate." "Drive," Alexander ordered through clenched teeth. Jarek nodded and slid behind the wheel. The journey back was a blur of counting breaths and maintaining pressure. Tessa monitored Alexander's color, his pulse, the steadiness of his breathing. He never looked away from her face, as though she were his anchor to consciousness. Dawn was just breaking as they pulled into the estate's private medical bay. The trauma team rushed out with the stretcher, efficiently transferring Alexander from car to treatment room. Tessa's hands felt empty without his wound to press against. She heard small, determined footsteps in the hallway. Theo appeared in the doorway, gripping his walker with white-knuckled determination, his face set in concentration as he took one careful step forward. "Papa," he called softly. Alexander's eyes snapped open. Everyone in the room held their breath as Theo took another step, then another. No miracle recovery, just the result of weeks of careful practice, clean blood, and relentless work. 3 steps that meant everything. "My boy," Alexander whispered, pride cracking through the pain in his voice. Theo reached the stretcher and Tessa helped him grip the rail. The moment stretched, pure and perfect, father and son, both healing, both fighting their way back to strength. Alexander's hand shot out, catching Tessa's wrist. His grip was weak but insistent. "Marry me," he rasped, eyes fever bright. "Not a bet, not a game. My life." Tessa's free hand moved to brush sweat-dampened hair from his forehead. "Yes," she whispered, feeling the truth of it settle in her bones. "After you sleep." The monitors hummed steadily, marking each beat of his heart. Outside, the sun rose over the cliffs, painting the room in soft gold. Theo's small hand found hers, squeezing tight as they watched Alexander finally let exhaustion pull him under. The medical team worked efficiently around them, hanging fluids, checking vitals. But Tessa stayed focused on the rise and fall of Alexander's chest, counting his breaths just as she had in the car. Each inhale was a promise, each exhale a prayer. She thought of all the moments that had led here, scrubbing blood from marble, fighting for Theo's recovery, racing through gunfire with a child's stuffed bear clutched to her chest. Love hadn't come easily to any of them, but it had come truly, forged in fire and strengthened by choice. Theo leaned against her leg, tired from his monumental effort but unwilling to leave. She felt the slight tremor in his muscles from the exertion, the way he pressed closer when the nurses moved too quickly. Yet he stayed, watching over his father with the same stubborn courage that had helped him take those 3 vital steps. The morning light strengthened, warming the sterile room. Alexander's breathing deepened into true sleep, his face finally relaxing. The monitors kept their steady rhythm, a technological lullaby promising stability, promising life. Dawn painted the cliffside chapel in watercolor hues, sea mist curling around ancient stone as security teams maintained their perimeter. Inside, stained glass cast jeweled shadows across the small gathering. No flowers, no finery, just raw truth and promises forged in fire. Jarek stood as witness, his usual stoic expression softened by something almost paternal. Theo sat in the front pew, fingers wrapped around the silver charm hanging from his neck, eyes bright with quiet joy. Alexander wore a tailored black suit that couldn't quite hide the bulk of bandages beneath. His shoulder was healing well, but the wound served as a permanent reminder of bullets meant for Tessa. She stood before him in a simple cream dress, her hair loose around her shoulders the way he liked it. The priest kept the ceremony brief, understanding the need for discretion. Outside these walls, the machinery of justice ground forward. Bianca's accounts lay frozen, her carefully constructed world crumbling under forensic scrutiny. Calder sat in custody, singing a pretty song about medical fraud and conspiracy. Reznikov's network was unraveling thread by thread as Alexander's evidence found eager hands in law enforcement. But here, in this moment, there was only them. "You're mine," Alexander breathed when it came time for vows, his voice rough with possession. "Only mine." His hands trembled slightly as he slid the ring onto her finger, not from weakness, but from the weight of everything unsaid. Tessa met his gaze steadily. "On my terms too," she answered, taking his hand to place his ring. The gold caught the light as she added her own promise. "Partners, equals, family." He nodded once, sharp and decisive. In that gesture lay volumes: acceptance, surrender, triumph. The priest pronounced them married, but they had forged their bond long before, in midnight vigils and gunfire, and the quiet victory of a child's healing steps. The scene flowed seamlessly into late morning, sun climbing higher as they moved to the garden. Brunch was laid out on white-clothed tables, crystal catching light, while security maintained discreet positions along the perimeter. The air smelled of roses and sea salt. Tessa stood between father and son on the stone path, one hand extended to each. "Remember the rhythm we practiced," she encouraged. "Step, pause, find your balance." Theo's face scrunched in concentration as he lifted his foot. The movement was small but controlled, worlds away from the helpless child of months ago. Alexander matched his son's pace on Tessa's other side, his own steps measured as he continued healing. "That's it," Tessa praised as Theo completed his motion. "Now Papa's turn." Alexander's lips quirked. He still wasn't used to being coached, but he'd learned to surrender to her gentle authority where recovery was concerned. He took his step, careful not to pull his injured shoulder. "Perfect," Tessa said. "Now laugh! Laugh!" Alexander raised an eyebrow. "It helps release tension. Trust me." Theo giggled first, the sound pure and bright. It started a chain reaction, Tessa's warm chuckle, then finally Alexander's deep rumble joining in. The garden seemed to glow brighter at the sound. They made their way down the path like this: step, pause, laugh, step. A strange little dance, but one that belonged purely to them. At the end, Alexander's arm curled around Tessa's waist, pulling her close. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling deeply. This was a quiet he'd never known before. Not the silence of isolation or the false peace of power, but true tranquility. The kind that came from knowing your loved ones were safe, healing, and wholly yours. The afternoon stretched golden around them. Theo had worn himself out with his exercises and now napped under a soft blanket with an easy view. His chest rose and fell in peaceful rhythm, one hand still curled around his charm. Servants moved quietly, refreshing drinks and clearing plates. Jarek coordinated security rotations with hand signals, maintaining protection without intruding on the moment. The waves crashed against the cliffs below, a constant reminder of nature's wild heart beating beyond their sanctuary. Alexander pressed a kiss to his wife's temple. "Home," he murmured, the word carrying all the weight of a man who had finally found his place in the world. Tessa leaned into him, careful of his injury. The ring on her finger caught the light, sending prismatic patterns dancing across the tablecloth. She watched them shift and scatter, remembering nights of blood on marble, of counting breaths in darkness, of fighting tooth and nail for this family they'd built. The house rose behind them, no longer a fortress of secrets and shadows. Light poured through windows that once stayed shuttered. Flowers bloomed in beds that had gone untended. Even the air felt different, as though the very stones had absorbed their joy and reflected it back. The roses in the garden had started, blooming again, their perfume carrying on the salt breeze. White petals scattered across the lawn like wedding confetti, nature's own celebration of this day. Bees hummed lazily between blossoms, unconcerned with the guards or guns or complex human hearts finding their way to peace. Theo stirred slightly in his sleep, smiling at some pleasant dream. Alexander's arm tightened around Tessa's waist, and she covered his hand with hers, feeling the matching rings pressed together. The house behind them, the cliffs below, the endless sea beyond, all of it finally felt like it belonged to the three of them.